All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a minute to do a recording. I'm going to continue recording, but we're going to go to do our first activity. So our first activity, in the box, there is a link. I want you to take a note of the link, and we're going to ask you to take a couple minutes, a few minutes. And what you're going to do is you're going to complete that questionnaire. It's reflection, it's silent writing. And when you finish, I want you to consider a few questions as you are doing this kind of work and this kind of consideration. I want you to think about an opportunity to reflect. So we call this introduction as a cultural risk proficiency receptivity scale. And I want, as you're doing that, for you to think about your initial reflections and observation. Take a minute to do that. So as you're doing that, think about your initial reflection and observation. And later on, we will have an opportunity to work on that more. So continue to do that. I'm sharing my screen for a minute intentionally because I want you to see where we're going to be at in our pepper. So once you've finished that, you're going to realize there is something for you to do with that. We have time to finish that. We don't have to finish it today. We have time to do that. But I want you today to complete your first part, which is your initial post. So those of you who are listening to me as well, you're expected to complete, to engage in that silent write and to complete this first part of that process. Okay. And I'll pause the recording here and then we'll come back. So good job, everyone. So by now, you know, whether you're here present or you're listening, you would have completed the questionnaire. And the first part of this activity is really personal. It's really about what are you thinking? You're asking yourself very, very intentional question. What does this mean for me as a person? What am I seeing? And Sophia, you may see something in question 1, but I may see something in question 6 or question 7. Aliyah may something jump out at Aliyah in question maybe 4 or question 5. One of the big questions that we look at a lot is we ask about, I believe. What is it that you believe? I've had persons who just talk about what is it that they believe. I've had persons discuss about their own learning and unlearning. I've had students who discuss about the practice. Is there hope? Is there direction? So you ask about these things. What is going to be beautiful is that in the next class or by the end of the week, I won't do it until about Friday, I'll share with everyone, all the groups, the results. Because when you get the results, you get to get other insights of how people are thinking. And I can tell you of a fact that I've gone to many different schools and I've done this kind of workshop, and different places, people are different places. That's why I said to you about where you are on the journey. So we're going to revisit this again. Later on, we're going to revisit it again, but it's about your initial conversation with yourself. Our district, remember you're not a teacher yet, but some of you have great experience in schools and camps, but think about yourself even as a student. I've had many students who have written their reflection, not based on themselves as a new teacher in training, but them as a person who is a student as well. And think, our district, our school, the school I'm a part of, and are successful only when all subgroups, that word come back again, thank you for that word, Diana, are improving academically and socially. Many people agree, many people don't. Others don't. I've been in places where it's very, very, very wide, Now look at let me give an example. Look at the agreement here versus the agreement here. Cultural discomfort and disagreements are normal in a diverse society as ours and part of everyday interaction. But some people may disagree based on what they consider to be discomfort. Some people may disagree because they feel like, no, it shouldn't be a discomfort. We all should get along. So there are different places you're coming from. And I want you to understand there are no wrong and right answers. It's not a quiz. It's where you are at. And that's why you get to read through. I love this part of our learning. You get to read through comments and you get to decide which two of your peers you'd like to respond to. So then we get into this activity where you share your initial, notice I said initial observation. You don't need to quote anybody. You don't need to review any readings. It's just your thoughts. Later on in the program, in the course, we will revisit it when you get to see the actual results of all our groups, and you're going to get to revisit it again to see what we're talking about. So that's the process there. All right. So we're going to stop sharing that. We're going to stop there for a minute, and then we're done that for now. Okay. So I'm still on the recording because I want the next. So we're going to go into our next activity. So that activity, what you're doing now, is what you'll finish later on today. So there's no other do this later on until 4 o'clock. This is your activity to work on today. What we're going to do now is our next in-class activity, and we're going to get into that. So everybody has completed their reading. Everybody did their reading. I'm sure you did. I'm going to say you did. I'm going to be proud of you that you did. And what we want to do is we want to get into the idea. We already talked about why a course like this. So we already discussed why a course like this. We already get into that. You know, our education system is one size does not fit all. We want you to understand. I'm sure some of you have seen this before. If you have not, then you're going to see this many times. This is school. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. And we want you to understand that one size does not fit all. There are students right now in that very class who have failed on arrival. They didn't have an opportunity, Lee, to even figure out if they could do this selection, do this test, because the way it has been set up, some of those students will fail and some will excel. Think about those students. Figuratively speaking, think about those students. Think about your classrooms. All our students will be at the same place. I had an amazing class last night in the same CTL504. I took urban education. One of my students in second year shared an experience that really, she said to her, really let her understand where she was getting herself into. She went to a school and she realized that a student had come back to the class who was incarcerated. And she said, you know, how do you now walk into a classroom where a student comes into the classroom who has been incarcerated, missed out a 2 months of class? How do you start to teach maths to that student? Are you unaware of what that student is experiencing? In the same school, she talked about students who are in and out of school because they were in foster homes. And as soon as they moved, they changed school. So school is more than what many of us think. And school is more than what some of us have experienced. And school is more than what many of us have lived through at school. Some of us come from very great school experience, and that is good. I was asking students to introduce themselves in my core the other day, and it warmed my heart when a student said, I want to be a male teacher like the male teachers that I had. It was just beautiful. And I said to him, I hope you realize how privileged you are to say as a racialized person, you have had a bunch of male teachers in your life that were amazing. That's rare for many people. That's rare. And so that's the kind of influence we want to think about, what brings us here. So what we're going to do, we're going to go into our class activity. We're going to go into our breakout discussion. And what we're going to do in this breakout discussion, we're going to look at our favorite quote from the most impactful quote from the reading. So it's going to be a discussion. Everybody in that group and everybody in the room will share, will post on the Jamboard. I'm going to give you a copy of the Jamboard in a minute. Everybody will be given a copy to share on the Jamboard to say, here is my most impactful quote. I know the Jamboard has a limit. If you're in a room where the Jamboard will not allow you to post your most impactful quote, then you can ask someone to post for you, or later on when that person come off the Jamboard, you can post it. All right. So if everybody you're allowed now, you're going to see a Jamboard. Let me share that so those who are following us later on can get it. So every class have their own Jamboard. You see that? I see you piling into the Jamboard, everybody. Wonderful. And you're going to go in breakout rooms at this time. In the breakout room at this time, you are going to go to the class reading, the mandatory class reading. And from that, you are going to share with your peers in that breakout room what was the most impactful quote for you and why. Share it. All you need to share on the Jamboard is the most impactful quote. When you put in the bracket, maybe you put the page, and then you are going to discuss with your peers. Why was this? So I would encourage you to do it this way. Everybody go into the Jamboard first. You share your most impactful quote. You post it. Page 1, page 2, page 3. There are many pages to the Jamboard. Remember, a Jamboard is not only the first page. So when you're finished with page 1, it's full. You go to page 2, you go to page 3, you go to whatever page, and you post. Once we're full up, we go on to the next page. And you have all of those information. And then what you do is that you're discussing why was this the most impactful quote for you. All right. So I see a question from you, Sophie. I'm going to take that, but I want to pause the recording. Then I take your question. All right. Wonderful. So it's a good opportunity for everybody to have discussions. I went into a couple rooms to get to hear the discussions, quite interesting stuff. Something that stood out to me, Julia was talking about the streaming, and I think you're talking about, Julia, you said something that you was like, how long was this conversation happening? And that is so powerful when you said it, because I smiled, because that is it. That's one of the issues we're having. We're having a lot of non-action happening. And Sarah S., you said it. You said, and I use your quote, nothing is really being done. You're talking about the data and the evidence is there, but nothing is really being done. And I want us to understand, I was at a conference the other day, and I really want to highlight this as we get into the next part of our wrapping up our discussion today, actually. I was a part of a conference here. They just listen, go to learn and to listen. And an indigenous leader was speaking. And he said something that has never left me. I've used it. Maybe you'll see it in one of my presentations. It has never left me. He said, do something with the anger. What we felt when we heard the number 215, everybody reacted different. And I hope most of you did react with empathy with that when you heard the number 215. But what is the action? Like Sarah just said, nothing is really being done. What is being done? People are surprised that Truth and Reconciliation document is stale. That's long ago. What are we doing on it? So this year, big year, September the 30th, they are recognizing Truth and Reconciliation Day, right? But it still have not taken up the traction it should as yet. There are not many discussions about it as yet. So this is it. When people, equity deserving groups, racialized groups, indigenous groups are seeking and pushing, we have to realize our job as advocates, ally, activists, co-conspirator, accomplice, whatever you want to call yourself, is to work at ensuring that our schools create those opportunities where our students can learn and unlearn. There are classrooms that have done amazing work about Orange T-shirt Day. And there are classrooms where the students don't know what Orange T-shirt Day is. Who do you think decides that? You and I. The teachers decide that. So I want us to understand what is our role here. What is our role here in education? What is our role? So I'm glad I hear those discussions. We're going to have more of those discussions. When something impacts you, how does it impact you to change and to act? And that is one of the biggest things that I want to leave with you as we continue in this conversation. How are these discussions impacting you to act? How are these discussions impacting you to change? How are these discussions impacting you to do something? And so I'm going to wrap this up with a quick just overview, and then we will have the end of the day to just do what we need to get done. All right, so let me share my screen again with you. So we already have a conversation about why a course like this, right? Why this course? What brought us to this course? Why is this course important? Because we want, as educators, to use our access, our abilities, our opportunities to be the caregivers that we are, to be the teachers that we are, to ensure that we see change in our schools, and the change will happen through us. Okay, so we had this conversation about your reading response, the most impactful quote. There are so many amazing quotes I've looked at so far. I'm going to stop here for a minute because I want to share that myself. So many amazing quotes that I've looked at so far to see where people are at, to see where people are at in this conversation. Where are you at? Why is this quote impacted you? What about this quote that impacted you? It's important for us to see that. And what I want from you to start practicing is arranging the quotes properly. All right. So you're going to do this a lot when you're doing other classes, and how to make space for that. If you want to make it bigger, you want to make it, and remember, we can all move these things around. So yeah, this is Jamboard. We're getting used to that. Awesome. We're going to give this one some more space. So I just want to do that as a demonstration to show you all this kind of stuff we are going to do as educators, and we kind of arrange ourselves together as a group. And if you need to go back to fix yours, I want to ask you to do that, because what will happen is that you can download a copy of this. So everybody can download a copy of this to have it, to look at it, to share. Go ahead, Sarah.
I just meant to ask, when we're doing like quotes in Jamboard, should we be citing them, like what page we got them from and things like that?
Yes, yes, very
Okay.
important we do that, please. Yes,
Cool.
absolutely,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
You're welcome. Very good question, and I'm glad we capture that one for the other groups as well, because that's going to be something big and something else, Sarah. I want to piggyback on that, on an issue like that. When you're also doing quotes for your discussions, you're going to realize that it's always important. Many professors will not say it. Some will be very deliberate in saying it. Make sure you put at the bottom of whatever your reference. So if you had a discussion, once you cite someone in your post, you must put the reference at the bottom, all right, at the discussion, because it's a practice we want to make sure we engage in. So let's look at some of these issues and some of these concerns we talk about as we talk about education in our school system. And so this is just a slideshow for you of the issue that we are dealing with. One of the issues you saw about the streaming. Now, I mean, Julia talked about what took them so long to do this, right? There's a lot of things that is undone in our school, and the discrimination in school, we talk about that. We look at the grant to aid suspended, expelled Black students. Very big discussion about the number of students who have been suspended, who are racialized. The school to prison pipeline. That's, if you have never heard that before, something to write down, to research. It's amazing. The facts, as you said, Sarah, it's the data, the evidence that clearly states who is there. You know, the other day I shared something with you. I'm glad I want to share this in the recording. I want to continue my own growth, my own development. I have done 2 AQ courses in First Nation, well, 1 AQ, 1 ABQ in First Nation studies. I'm continuing my own growing. I have continued in my own investment in my learning. And one of the things I want to do is to take a trip to a First Nation reserve where I know people who are teaching. And so just nonchalant, Alexandra, Anna, Sarah, I'm having a conversation with a guy I know who teach at a workshop at a reserve. And I said to him, I want to take a week to come and visit. Listen to me carefully. Listen to my learning that day. And he said to me, oh, we'll be sure I could, I would host you. Don't expect the indigenous people to talk to you because you're a stranger. You come there, you leave in a couple of days. But he said, I'll host you, and you're an educator. You could come and talk at my school, whatever. And then he said to me, it's 3 planes to get there. I said, what? He said, 3 planes. One from here, Toronto to Thunder Bay, one from Thunder Bay to another place, and one from the other place to the reserve. And he said, return is $2,000. I see you shaking your head, Anna. Thank you. I literally went into my car, and I literally, when I drove off, I said, that's what I'm talking about. It's more than just say, well, indigenous people, this, indigenous, we have to understand. It takes $2,000 to take a trip. Ask yourselves, how often will these people get to leave their reserve? Think about the financial stability and the challenges. And think about why we had so many indigenous students have to be sent to Thunder Bay to school. And why there's always the suicide news about a student in Thunder Bay. Why a country like ours, who have all this money, are we doing the best we can? Ask ourselves these questions. These are questions I want you to ask yourself, to wrestle with, to think about as we do this work, as we think about our learning and our unlearning. I want us to ask ourselves these questions, because a lot of us, what we know about indigenous people is what we hear in the media, what we hear somebody said along the way, what we hear in a gossip, what we hear in a conversation. Have we invested in our unlearning? One of the examples I've talked about for my personal unlearning is when September the 11th happened. I was teaching in the US. I was literally standing in a bank and getting some money from my bank account in the US, September the 11th, when the second plane went to the tower. I saw it live on TV right there. I was in America when that happened. And all of a sudden, I have never had a Muslim friend. I've never had a Muslim neighbor. I know nobody who's Muslim in Jamaica. I've just never been around anyone who's Muslim before that I know of. Maybe I did, but I didn't know they were Muslim. And immediately we were wired to, once you see someone in a hijab, you must behave a certain way. You must be fearful. You must be tense. You must, because that equals terror. And that's a narrative we have had for years. Until now, we're disrupting that narrative. So think about what you and I need to unlearn. Ask yourself, what is it that I need to unlearn? What is it that I need to unlearn? Ask yourself those questions, all right? Another example of is school failed student bombarded by racist Instagram message. These are all, I'm showing you issues in the news so you understand what we're dealing with. 5th grade sold in mock auction at the New Jersey school, right? This has happened, right? Like, yeah. But what I hope you realize what I'm doing. I'm showing you the news in the school so you understand these are qualified people like yourselves, qualified teachers who have taken this commitment to allow students to be a great and amazing. But this is what we do at school. Education Minister summoned New York board leaders to meet about allegations of racism. Some of you may not know about this, but this happened in the York board, and then we had the person being terminated. He was fired. So when people are seeing what's happening in Peel, a lot of you know that Peel has been in the news. Peel, the same thing happened. They terminated the director of education. The ministry gave them a whole lot of sanctions and things they need to address. But Peel was not the first board. York region went through this. They terminated the director for this. So here we go again with Sarah says, nothing is really being done. And another board is doing this. In the middle last year of all that George Floyd and everybody was talking about anti-Black racism, there were schools where teachers were being put on blast on Twitter because a teacher still found an old book with an old example to tell a story about what Black people should do or what they were or who they are. And we are still sitting in deficit narrative. Deficit narratives. So we want us to think about what we are doing. Mishandling of the discrimination, dismantling of equity policy. This happened at the York Region Board in schools. In schools. Toronto posters promoted gender diversity, defaced them. So when we come to the idea to say, well, this is Toronto, we are more inclusive community. This is our school, TDSB, we're one of the most inclusive boards. Think about Peel, that has so many racialized students in the board. Think about it. Autism program coming into October. This was in the news. I remember in 2017, practitioners to be regulated. I would never forget so many parents felt disenfranchised by what happened in the autism work that was being done. When you have a student in your class who is on the spectrum, how are those issues being dealt with? when we talk about sexuality and homophobia and Islamophobia and these issues. As a school teacher, I hope you know, if you walk in your grade 11 maths class right now, if you walk into your grade 11 maths class and a child turns to another child and use a derogatory slur, I hope you know, as a teacher, you don't get to turn your back to the class and just start to teach on the board. I hope you know you are being held accountable for what you did in that discussion. And that's what the OCT and other people and the unions are pushing for even more. Levels of accountability from our educators in the room. If a child falls and bursts his head in school, we are accountable for that fall. So people are saying, when a child says to another child, you this, you that, and certain racial slurs and sexual slurs and whatever slur, what is happening with the teacher? Where's your responsibility? That's why you talk about calling out and calling in. We have had it in university. We have had it right in the NT program. We have had students who have reported racism in the class. We have students who have reported homophobia and transphobia in the class. We have had these issues. So I hope you understand the kind of person I am. I am not coming to this school, to this class thinking, well, we are all 30 people in this room and we are all woke. I don't come here with that kind of narrative. That's not what I do, because I do a lot of workshops. I was at a school just the other day, I remember, and the principal pulled me aside before I start the workshop, and she said, Dr. Cameron, just let you know, I've had a teacher right in the workshop here who have used a white teacher who have used the N-word twice in my office in 1 month, twice. So when I go to a workshop and I talk about anti-Black racism or equity or social justice or anything to do with disability and ability and ageism and sexism, the entire equity continuum, I am quite aware that many of us are still crowded by our unconscious bias, still crowded by what our grandma told us. For many of you, I am sure, I know for many people in Oise, I'm not sure for many of you, I am your first Black professor. I have been the first Black professor for many students at Oise. And they are coming from spaces where they have never seen a Black man with my kind of personality and persona. The research is there that says immediately they question my validity. They question my value. They question why I am here, because this is not the kind of person you're used to at a university of this level and caliber. This is a kind of deficit thinking that many of us are used to. We grow up in. The Black person you know is a person who clean your street, or your housekeeper, or your pool person, or your gardener. And then you transfer to a space where the Black person is the academic coordinator and the professor. And many people struggle with how to do that. There are tons of stories I could share with you about that in educational spaces. So we have to know what we are doing in this. We see this happen in 2019 in Alberta, Catholic board in Alberta, where the mother rejected school apology because the school policy says no do-rag. And if you know anything about do-rag, there are two racialized bodies of people that really focus on do-rag, Black and Latina. And so when you have made one head covering to be an issue, I'm sure everybody's seen a lot of posters going around these days, a meme that if you have a problem with an hijab and have no problem with a non covering, then what is the issue? Because they are both religious coverings. But how were you taught? What were you taught to respect and admire? I have worked with nuns who wear habit, who wears the habit to school. I've taught in Catholic board for 3 years in the Bahamas. I have worked with nuns who wear all of that garb and all of that, clothes to school. And we respect and treasure and respect when we see sisters, when we see sister coming, because we were taught that from our colonizers, that this garment that is worn deserves a level of admiration and respect. But we are also taught that that garment deserve to be feared and ridiculed. So I want you to think about our own self as we get into this. Bradford Student Disciplinary Action for Racist Homophobic Instagram Post 2019. School board takes action. Many of you are going to be in schools where you are going to be part of these conversations because you're either going to be the teacher of the class, and these are serious meetings. They take over your whole life. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to be a part of it. Oh, no, you get to be a part of it. When you do 7074, you're going to realize the blue pages. Have anybody ever seen the blue pages yet? Anybody see the blue page? You're going to see the blue pages yet. Thanks, William. You have seen it. You see the kind of stuff that teachers do. You kind of really wonder, did they go to university and got an OCT like me? Because they can't be. Yes, they do. We've seen this one in Ottawa. School board investigates a racist prom proposal. Yeah, William, it happens, right? We talk about racialized students do not report homophobic incidents. The whole research on that because of who they are and because of the idea that you must be tough and the lack of mental health and well-being. I'm sure everybody heard a lot of conversation about mental health lately, especially for racialized students, right? We saw this in the Peel when the trustee all over the news used the word "mock criminal" to describe, and the person, a trustee on a school board. So the ministry had to step in to see that they disturb and stop the criminalization of their students. In the middle of COVID, anybody remember this? Middle of COVID, when we were all home trying to deal with our first break locked up, and the middle of George Floyd and all the unlearning. I mean, last year, 2020, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing about anti-Black racism because of the George Floyd incident. And with yet still, it's in a school, right there in a school, someone in a yearbook went in and changed a student message, tribute to his grandmother, and changed it to a racist message. The school board, teachers, who is on the committee, I hope you know, there's a whole situation going on there. How do you react to these levels of issues when you hear the number 215 as an educator, knowing these are children that came to school and did not go home? What is your reaction? We saw this happen in London, the murder of the Muslim family. We saw the anti-Asian attacks. So we have to engage in a courageous conversations. So these are courageous conversations. My job is not to look into your heart at the end of the course to give you an A+ because you have changed. That's not my job. You're not getting an A+ or an A because you have shown me that you're culturally competent. You're getting that grade because you have engaged in the course and you have completed the task. Your job about understanding and engaging in a courageous conversation begins with this, understanding who you are. So this way we're going to stop this. This way we're going to wrap up the conversation, is understanding there. And I leave you with this, that the diversity awareness begins with yourself. The awareness in this class, in this course, in this world, to be a part of the change begins with self. A lot of boards, a lot of schools I've realized over the years they have made grave mistakes because they started the discussion on equity from a framework, equity policy, strategic plan with the equity section, and they go into the equity book. And I've had students, I've literally had students 3 years ago. I had one set of students, about 4 guys who are aggressive. And they were like, oh, this is not quality teaching because they want a journal to read. What is the journal going to do to you? Because what you want is for me to teach you the way that you know what teaching is supposed to look like. And for you, being a novice, teaching look one way. University teaching look one way. That's why so many professors are talking about decolonizing education. What does that mean? You hear that term a lot lately. We're decolonizing and deconstructing. What does that really mean? Let me give an example what that means. Myself, when I went to do my master's degree, when I went to do my undergrad, when I went to do my PhD, 90% of every single thing that I read in university were written by white men. Decolonizing is saying there are other kinds, there are other knowledge, there are other voices we need to hear. And that is why we're intentional about the readings you're getting. That is what we're talking about. We talk about decolonize. We start with ourselves, asking ourselves, why do I think this way? We want you to be aware that what makes you different. What makes you different? What are your prejudices and your biases? We all have biases. We all have unconscious bias, but we hope they're unconscious. And how are we working to eliminate them and to lessen them? How are we acknowledging our power and our privilege? How are we acknowledging that? And how are we using it? Not just acknowledge it. Because my job is, when we talk about white supremacy or white privilege, that's not to talk about to make anybody feel away. It's to say, hey, acknowledge this. And how do we use this to create access? How do you use your power and your privilege to change your classroom? That is why we are here. We are not here to unpack who you voted for and your political conversation. And I'm not here for that. We are here to find out, when you go into the classroom, how do I ensure to give you what you need so you can teach all students? The one who's hard of hearing, the one who identify with they and them pronoun, the one who just came off the plane because that student is a refugee from Afghanistan. And I didn't plan to say this, but it's funny. I'm sitting here and I was looking at the news, and the mayor of Toronto says we're looking to take 20,000 Afghanistan refugees. And I could tell you tons of stories when the Syrian crisis happened. Anybody remember that? It was not too long ago. And we started taking Syrian refugees in our schools. Two stories I'm going to use to end this. I went to interview for an LTO. It was late May going into June. And the principal literally just needed someone. And our choice of words were just to hold the children, because they are not really for this particular school, but they are being housed in a hotel nearby. And they're going to bring them here, and we just house them until, because they're not really going to be at that school. And our entire language was very deficit. And I said to her, and this is where you use your power and your privilege, because I'm not trying to beg a job at that time, right? And so, yeah, maybe I would speak to her differently if I was trying to really beg a job. And that I shared with you very particularly because I want you to understand that many people who are marginalized do not speak up for many reasons. You follow me? And so I said to her, well, if I get this job, I don't want to hold them for 2 months. I said there's 6 weeks left of the school year. I can just imagine what I could do in 6 weeks to calm them down and to let them feel a sense of belonging here at the TDSB. I know she wasn't going to hire me. When I said that, I know she wasn't going to hire me, but I did it on purpose, because I wanted her to understand what she was doing was not what needs to be done. We don't need to create a holding cell for these kids. We need you to give them an experience that they will say, I spent 6 weeks in that class with Miss Anna, or with Miss Sarah, or with Miss Emily. Or like you're all surname S, they'll call you Miss S. So when you go to the school, just get your name quick, because if not, by recess, everybody call you Miss S. So quickly tell them what you needed to be called, okay? By recess, first recess, 10:15, they'll call you Miss S, including the high school students. So you have to intercept that when you see those kind of deficit thinking, and be conscious of the difference and be deliberate about inclusion. That's what we want you to focus on. How do we be deliberate about equity, diversity, and inclusion in our schools? All right. So we're going to stop there. We're going to stop there as it is for that. And what I need from us is to look at the things we're going to do now. So the 2 things we have to do: first class, don't want to make you feel, all like, oh my God, Dr. Campbell, this is so much going on today. All right. So first class, take a break. when you come back from your breaks, even those who are listening to the recording, take your break. When you come back from your break, here's what we're going to do. When you come back from your break, you have two things you need to do. You need to make sure you finish your introductions. Remember to do your introduction. If you didn't complete your introduction, I'm going to read and say hi, and you can say hi to somebody. You can comment on somebody's introduction. And then you have today's work to look at, which is this one to do. Make your initial post, but you have an entire week to finish it. All right. I ask you to make your initial post today while it's fresh. You have an hour to do that. Come back and make your initial post when it's fresh in your mind. How are you reacting to the data? What did you see? What are you seeing in the questions? Even just responding to the question, what came to your mind? First thoughts, initial thoughts. That's all they are. All right, so we're going to stop here. We're going to stop the recording here, and then I'll take questions from this class in particular.